I think beyond the obvious thing that you need like to set aside that fear of posting and like you need to start writing, you need to start creating that content because that's the only way to do it. But I think on the other side, it's also important to engage with the community. So engage with other people content, comment, learn, engage, participate.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Sustainability Leader Show. I'm Max, co-founder of TSC, and I am your host today. The purpose of this podcast is to share the stories of sustainability leaders and the hands-on lessons they've learned throughout their career. With this show, we want to cut through the noise and provide short sessions packed with actionable insights, success stories, and practical advice from sustainability leaders who actually drive sustainability in organizations worldwide. And this podcast is brought to you by the Sustainability Circle, the private community for sustainability leaders. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Antonio Vizcaya Abdo, consultant and professor for sustainability at two of Mexico's most prestigious universities. Antonio is an educator by heart and a very active thought leader for sustainability on LinkedIn. Antonio, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for the invite. I'm super happy to be here and excited for the discussion ahead.
So, as usual in our podcast, I'd like to start with some short rapid fire questions to actually warm ourselves up and to get accustomed for the ongoing discussion. Antonio, are you ready?
Let's do it.
So, Antonio, morning person or night owl?
I think morning person.
Who is a thought leader next to yourself, maybe, for sustainability you admire on LinkedIn?
I really like what David Carley is doing. He's shared like amazing insights.
And what's your favorite sustainability topic to discuss on LinkedIn?
I think maybe like business strategy, like strategy building and stuff like that.
So what's one book on sustainability everyone should read?
I think for me, the most relevant and maybe like eye-opener was Thinking in Systems. I think it's like a most read for people around stuff and sustainability.
I like that as well. That's true. What's your favorite way to unwind after a business day?
I really kind of like to sometimes do some exercise, playing paddle, spend some time with friends, depending on the day, depending on what happened afterwards. But yeah.
Yeah. So as you also told me in our prep call, you're basically working out of Mexico mostly for European companies. So I guess actually you're going to start very early and then you finish rather soon, or how is it? How is your usual day?
That was the plan, but I think now because of different projects, I end up starting very early, finish very late. So it's the worst of the two worlds, I think, but also the good kind of like the opportunity to work in the different places.
I understand. Okay, maybe let's start by diving in a bit into your journey. How did you first get involved into sustainability and what led you to where you are today?
I think like I started working in a law firm for a couple of years. At that moment, I was like super focused on trying to work on social impact projects, more on like on the non-profit side. For me, like the personal commitment was that I was like I wanted to invest my time in something that creates some value for the people and for the planet. But then I struggled to being able to create some impactful projects in the nonprofit side in Mexico. So I don't know, like having different conversations with people from different industries, from different organizations, they put me kind of like in front of me this word of like sustainability, which was the first time that I hear about it. So once I started researching about sustainability, I learned about the opportunities and the capabilities for the business sector to actually do something and kind of support in solving social and environmental problems. So for me, it was like an eye opener of thinking about, okay, business have a huge role to play. There are like so many business out there actually doing amazing stuff about how we can address those type of problems. So like it started like very conceptual in my mind, like just like researching about sustainability, doing some stuff. Then when I started working in the Mexican Football Federation, this was like the first moment in which I started doing more technical and corporate things around sustainability. And then after that, I never stopped.
Yeah. Got addicted, basically.
A little bit.
And what did you then basically do in order to become a professor? And what was the motivation to actually do that?
I think because of, I don't know, I would say that I joined the sustainability journey a bit late in my professional career. So I had this kind of, I don't know, I just was like super committed of trying to get as much knowledge as I can. And then I realized that at some point, I think sustainability information, it's very difficult to access if you're not like a sustainability expert. So little by little, I started just like doing more research, and then I started putting those resources out there for people that like me wasn't a sustainability expert. So I was like super committed of making that information, those concepts, those resources accessible to everyone. And because of that, I start little by little getting involved in the education piece, because what I did daily was actually educating or raising awareness to other people. So I don't know, at some point it was like, okay, maybe education and what I'm doing in the sustainability space makes sense. And then at that point, I start just like knocking doors to different universities, trying to create a
Mhm.
specific course and a specific platform for sustainability for those kind of as a first point of contact for people not involved in sustainability.
Yeah. So are you actually giving introductory classes into sustainability or
Yeah,
what is
yeah. I
it?
think right now what I'm doing at the university level is much more introduction. Kind of, it's sometimes like the first time students know about sustainability. So the approach is to be like super practical, super fun, show different projects, and instead of being like super boring and technical, that I know sustainability it's like super complex, and for sure you need like a lot of time and a lot of support to understand all the concepts. The idea is, as this is the first time you hear about the word, my kind of like my goal is just to get that curiosity ignited, and then for students just to keep ahead in the journey.
Yeah. I think this is actually the most important job, right? To get people into sustainability in order to, first of all, get them excited to basically, yeah, give good introductions. And then you have your job as a professor, but you're also a consultant, right? So maybe tell us a bit about what are you doing in your consulting work?
I mostly work with two consulting companies. One, it's much more, it's based in Mexico. It's like a much more traditional sustainability consultancy firm. And they do like from putting together sustainability reports to working on a materiality assessment for businesses. So it's very traditional in terms of sustainability. And then for the other agency, it's an international impact company. And what we are doing is we try to use sports as platform to address complex social and environmental problems. So it's very different, the two of those. But I think the common point is trying to use business as a tool to solve those complex problems that we are facing today.
Yeah. And there is this consulting job. There's also the professor job. And then there is this job that we actually want to be talking about today. It's actually providing thought leadership on LinkedIn, right? I didn't say it in the introduction, but at the moment, I think you have above 60,000 followers on LinkedIn. And you are, at least in my opinion, providing a very great thought leadership by maybe actually you learned that in your professor courses by taking very complex sustainability constructs and explaining them in very easy manners. So that actually helped me also a lot and got me excited even more as I'm following your journey already since I think 1.5 years. So knowing that you are actually strong in the educational background and your ambition to educate as many people as possible in sustainable practices, I wonder if this is one of the drivers for you to actually share your knowledge on LinkedIn, or what is it that motivated you to start this journey?
Yeah, I think you're right on point. For me, at first, I think when I started researching and doing some work around sustainability, it was very difficult for me to access high quality and useful resources. But once I understand the hack, I understand the resources, I understand like the places to look, I found there's a ton of useful resources for all people out there trying to do some work around sustainability. So then it hit me. It was like, okay, now that I found this, I'm going to try to put these resources in a place that it's accessible to everyone. So I end up doing that, right? At the end, most of the things that I'm doing is saying, okay, I found this amazing resource. Here is for you if you want to use it, or like this framework or this, I don't know, diagram or whatever. But it's just trying to put all of these different concepts, all of these different resources in a way it's like accessible and visible enough for different people, not only those with 20 years of experience on sustainability, but people just starting the work, right?
Yeah. And I think also that we both agree that education can be a very powerful tool to transform behaviors of the people and also maybe then the generations to come, because I think we are at the moment living through a very big change process, so to say. So let's quickly talk about what those challenges are to actually make those very complex sustainability concepts easily understandable. What are, in your opinion, the biggest challenges in communicating sustainability issues to the general public? And maybe also, as you are doing that day by day, how to actually overcome them?
I don't know. I think the first barrier is not kind of like losing sight that sustainability itself, it's a very complex concept. And underlying that concept, you have like a million other different complex concepts, right? So even though sometimes I want to simplify that concept, I end up like oversimplifying it. And then you get some responses from people or scientists that are involved in the space that maybe the way that I frame it, it's not entirely accurate because you need to consider X, because at the end, we can't lose sight that the concept itself, it's again like super complicated, right? So I think for me, one of the most important barriers when I'm trying to communicate these complex concepts in a very academic way, but it's still very simplified, is not falling into the I'm oversimplifying it. And because of that, I'm providing you with wrong information. So I try to juggle between the middle of saying, I know there's like some of things behind it. I know there's like a ton of controversy around different concepts, but I'm going to put this in a way that it's super simple. And then if you want to go into the rabbit hole around those concepts, we can go into that. But at the end, the idea is this, right? Just find a point in the middle in which those complex themes are understandable in a way that people that are not expert can grasp the concept and then can use it in some way. So I think that's one of the barriers. And then I think the other barrier is there's a lot of interpretation and a lot of views and perspectives around different concepts. So it's interesting that there's a space in which when you're trying to say something, you receive a ton of, not like a ton of, but there's some criticism, like some backlash, some stuff like that. So I think we end up being super cautious of not saying something because we know that we are going to receive maybe like a negative response. But I think at least for me, I understand that I'm not close to be an expert. So I'm just like trying to provide those concepts as I know it and as I understand it. And then I'm super attentive of the responses that I get, the comments that I get, and then just try to use that to upskill my own kind of understanding of those concepts. So we need just to be a bit more open about those criticisms. And then on the other side, I think instead of just criticism, I think it's important for us to try to provide some value to the information that we are seeing instead of just saying, okay, you're wrong because of this, but maybe try to help the other people to arrive to the point that you are right.
Yeah. I think this is actually holding most of the people back when starting to basically stand up and share their opinion publicly, right? It's always this fear that you could actually express something that is wrong. And then the people basically have this blockade and they just don't get started. So yeah, that's very good advice. There's always people who know less than you. This is the main learning. And this is why just put out your knowledge and then you can be helpful of those who are actually, yeah, trying to learn and get started.
No, totally. And I would say there's people that know less. There's people that knows a lot more. So it's important to try to be open to receive both inputs because I think everyone, and I think that is key, like for me on the work that I've been doing on LinkedIn for this, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years. But at the end, I think that everyone has something to say. And at the end, it's important for everyone to try to use the voice in the way that they feel comfortable. But also we need to lose this fear of everything that we need to say, it needs to be perfect because it's just impossible. And for me, trying to put so much content, trying to talk about so many different concepts, by now I know that I often get the things wrong, and it's okay. I just try to learn about the mistakes that I'm doing and just try to learn from the input and the comments that I receive, and that's it. There's no better approach to do it. And I think if you translate that to the business approach, it happens something similar, right? We are now seeing a ton of businesses stop communicating about sustainability because they may think they get it wrong. And then the risk of actually sustainability destroying value for business is growing, right? And because of that, you're seeing more and more business being more silent, even though consumers and the general stakeholders are demanding more information and more transparency, right? So it's like a, I don't know, like a very, very weird moment.
We promised actionable advice in this podcast, and we wanted to talk about thought leadership on LinkedIn as well, right? So let's quickly switch gears and talk about thought leadership for sustainability on LinkedIn. I assume that many people who are listening in today actually want to know a bit more about your journey and get then tactical advice. So before we go into the weeds, what has maybe been the most rewarding part of your journey as a sustainability educator and thought leader on LinkedIn?
I think for me, the best part of it, it's like making connections. I think if we think about even our journey with the UMax, the only way that is going to be possible, it's because like we are in different continents. So at the end, being able to be visible and just put your voice out there and then be open to connect with people, then you have the opportunity to get involved in many different projects. So for me, the most rewarding piece of using my voice and kind of like being visible is the opportunity to connect with people that I wouldn't be able, like, it would be like impossible for me to connect with other people if not because of the work that I'm doing in LinkedIn.
Happy that we connected actually.
Yeah.
And that you're right now founding member of TSC. But I can also imagine that it took you a long time to actually build that following, right? I'm also trying to provide some thought leadership right now for TSC on LinkedIn. And I can tell, as maybe a lot of other people also know already who tried it, it actually takes a lot of effort and a lot of consistency. So when did you actually get started? And was there a certain point where your following took off?
I've started like 10 years ago, even when I was working in a law firm. And I think if you see the first content and the first article that I write on LinkedIn, it was about tax and law. So nothing related to sustainability. But for me, I'm always being kind of passionate about researching, commenting, stuff like that. So I think for me, it was just like a no brainer, just like to start putting some content. Then I think kind of like to your point, consistency is key. So little by little, I understand what were those like topics that I really like, then those topics that I had like a bit more to say. And then for me now, like all of my feed, all of the things that I'm doing, all of the things that I'm writing, it's about sustainability, right? I try not to engage with other stuff because also I know that in some way the audience that I have wants to know about sustainability. So I have that consistency of not talking about sustainability and then talking about other stuff. So at the end, there's not like a secret recipe. At the end, you need to be very intuitive and understand what are those things that are working for you, for the audience that you have, for the network that you're building, and then just try to learn from all the things that you're doing and keep doing more of the things that are working right and stop doing the things that you're seeing that has no impact or are not well received, right? So it's like at the end, I think the most important part is being consistent and also being like super intuitive and just learn on the things that are working.
Being consistent sounds so easy, right? But actually to come up with engaging content, not sure actually how often you are posting, but I assume almost every day because I'm seeing a lot of content from you. Is there any kind of framework or routine, so to say, that you are following?
I think I'm doing like a post per day. But for
Mhm.
me, I think LinkedIn is like my personal diary, and it's like a way for me to even to study on sustainability. So I'm saying I'm going to put like to set aside an hour a day just to learn about a new concept and to write something about it. And again, I'm trying to be super efficient and not like overcomplicate myself. So I never put like more. I don't know. I think for me, a post take me like 30 minutes or an hour. I try to be like super fast and super efficient because at the end, this is not my work, right? In some way it is, but it's not my full-time work. So I know that I have like other responsibilities, other things to do. So I'm just like trying to be efficient. And then I use LinkedIn as a way of saving resources for me, for my own learning, but I'm also mindful of trying to put something in a way that other people understand. So I think it's both ways. But then when you are putting together content like daily or like a couple of times a week, I think it's important to set aside this mindset of putting something that it's going to be perfect, that it's going to take you 10 hours to prepare, and instead putting something that it's like super concrete, super useful in a way that it's fast and efficient.
Mhm. Let's get a bit more technical. So is there any kind of personal content framework that you are using? Do you have a content calendar and do you schedule in advance?
I don't have a calendar. I'm not as sophisticated as that. When I have some spare time, I do try to schedule some content. And because of that, I remove the pressure off if I need to do some things in some days and I don't have time. I need to juggle with everything. So I'll try to think ahead. But beyond that's it. I'm just like always in the look and researching and looking for new stuff. And every single time that I find something that I think it's relevant, I just go ahead and write something about it.
Okay, so it's really intuitive. So you don't have any kind of content pillars or whatever you actually find interesting and want to share. What
Yeah.
comes to mind?
No,
That's good.
maybe I should, but I don't.
Like I can tell you, I went down that rabbit hole. It can definitely become very complicated very easily. So I love your approach of just studying what actually interests you, because what interests you, you can then also share to others because you actually understood it. So that definitely makes sense. Yeah.
Also, and I think at the end, don't get me wrong, if you have that ability and those capabilities to structure what you want to say and do proper planning, I anticipate that also the results are going to be super useful. I think for me right now, I know the things that I'm looking for. I know the things that I'm going to write about. Sometimes I see things that for me looks amazing, but it's not actually related to what I'm usually writing. So I just move ahead. And at the end, just like trying to be efficient, right? And also thinking, at least for me, the end goal is to study a new concept, but also to present that concept in a way that other people understand, right? So because of that, the way that I write, the way that I put the concepts is like very academic, right? If I saw the type of content that other people do, and I think that's depending on the person, but if you see what I do, it's super academic, right? It's not personal at all. You're never going to see like a photo of me trying to do something. It's not my style. It's just like for me, more academic.
Yeah. Is it that you basically keep a list of notes, a list of ideas that you then draw from when you actually start iterating on posts?
Yeah, I have a WhatsApp chat for my own, and there I have like links, reports, notes, and I'm always saving. And then I think the important piece is like from one article, from one report, from one thing, you can get, I don't know, like 10 different ideas to put content. So I think there's a lot of information out there. I think the best idea is just like to be a bit more precise and concise on the ideas. And then on one thing, you can get 10 different notes, right?
Yeah. That's actually interesting, having an own WhatsApp chat for your notes. I actually need to put that down. That's cool. So yeah, I guess actually that a lot of people who will be listening to that podcast maybe either started already posting on LinkedIn or they actually want to get started on LinkedIn. And I'm of the opinion that we need more strong thought leaders, because the more people actually talk about sustainability, the more we can actually change in the world and bring about that change that we actually need. So what would be the advice if I would like to start out as a thought leader on LinkedIn from you?
I think beyond the obvious thing that you need like to set aside that fear of posting and like you need to start writing, you need to start creating that content because that's the only way to do it. But I think on the other side, it's also important to engage with the community. So engage with other people content, comment, learn, engage, participate. At the end, it's about like a community. I've seen people that they have so strong communities because of the way that they engage with the community, that the content that they put, it's super impactful because of the community that they get behind actually support that content. So I think like beyond the content itself, that I think at the end depends a lot on your style. If you want to do something super academic, if you want to do something more personal, if you want to put something that's like super concrete or something that it's like super thorough, I think depends a lot on what you want to achieve, right? I don't think there's like a great advice on that. But then on the other part, I think it's important that it's not only about you, right? You need like to engage with the community and try to provide that value to other people, right? As you want to get that value on your own. And as you are engaging, then you're going to start connecting with other people, being able to do collaborations, being able to do something that it's not like you on your own, right?
So listening to the audience is actually a very good tip, right?
Yeah.
Are you interacting a lot with people on your posts?
I try to do it. Sometimes I get comments that require an entire new post. So it's like it's sometimes like a bit difficult, but I try to do it. I try to read everything to comply, to engage. And then again, it's not only on the things that I'm posting, but also kind of like to a point, right? If I really like some other profiles, some other people that are really doing some great stuff, I try to engage with their work, learn about the things that they're doing, and again, it's like the content and your voice. It's not only putting that in a post, but you can also be like super vocal in comments and stuff like that, right?
What are the top resources that you turn to in order to get inspiration? Is there something that you can share?
In terms of resources, I don't know. I have a tab of 30 websites that I know have really nice resources. But again, it's me, I think. Then it's also important to try to look in different places. And I think right now there's so many information out there that it's very easy to just reaffirm our thoughts. So I'm always trying to look from different places, and because I know that sometimes I get it wrong. And if I go to the same place, I'm just going to stick putting the same information. So no, I think the best practice that I have and that I do is if I see a really nice post, information article or whatever, I try to go to the original source, right? If they mention a report, I try to go to the report and just like see the report. What are the organizations that actually put together the report, and just like understanding why I'm actually trusting in that information, right? Because then also as the engagement of the information that you're putting is growing, I think you also have a bit more of a responsibility trying to be accurate in the information that you're putting. So now I'm like super cautious of, okay, is this resource, I don't know, can I trust in this resource? And if I can, why? So because of that, then I'm able to put something. So I think going to the original source is like super important, and also understanding the organizations behind that resource. That's going to be key.
Yeah, this is also something that I am doing. I'm basically always keeping a list of posts that I find interesting for later. So when I have time to research, I actually can check them out, go to the resource, and then draw from there my next idea for the next post. So yeah, that's very great advice. And maybe one of the last questions, because it's really easy. I know that from own experience to actually get caught up in the weeds and then not do anything at all. So what are maybe the three main pitfalls that one should avoid when doing that on LinkedIn and posting frequently?
Yeah. I think the most common ones that I've heard is sometimes like people just feel awkward putting like a post or stuff like that. And then I think it's first you need to understand that it's like just one post. I don't know, like if you see the numbers of engagement and more like in LinkedIn, you're going to see that it's not going to have a million views. So I think sometimes we need just like to lose that fear of if you put a post and if that post is wrong, nothing's going to happen. So just be a bit more realistic on the impact and the reach that we are having. And because of that, just lose that fear. And then I think the other side is again, we sometimes try to do things perfectly. And because of that, we say, okay, if I want to do a post or like an article about this, then I'll need to invest 30 hours. And because of that, it's impossible because I have my work and other stuff. And I get it. It's just like impossible to invest like 30 hours on this. So I think we need to be a bit more quick and just kind of like sometimes we don't need like to be that thorough. Again, depending on what we are trying to achieve. But if we want to start like being a bit more consistent, maybe it's important to find more simple ideas and start with that, start engaging with more simple thoughts. And little by little, when we are getting, I don't know, when we are becoming faster, then we're going to be able to put like more complex thoughts faster, which I think that's something that I'm able to do because of the practice and the experience. But now maybe concepts that a couple of years ago would take me like 20 hours to put like in a post. Now I'm able to do it in an hour, but that's something that's little by little you're getting that experience of that practice, right?
I think this is a very important part. Be kind to yourself. Always when you start out, it takes longer, and over time, then you can get better. And then maybe also it makes a bit more fun. That's definitely true from my experience. So yeah, Antonio, we already talked, over more 30 minutes actually. And I think we could definitely talk 30 minutes more about that topic because it's so interesting. But it's time to wrap things up. Any last words that you want to give to the listeners?
That they do it, that they just go ahead and start with it. I think there's no better advice than that. Like just start doing it, start testing, understand what works and what doesn't. I think there's like a million like courses and people doing, I don't know, like personal branding exercise. And I for sure think that's like super useful if you think you need that structure. But at the end, I think the best thing to do is just go ahead and do it, try it and learn about what happened. And then I think the most important part, at least with it, is like to understand that this is a community. So engage with people, try to connect with people, reach out to people, and little by little, I think like you're going to get like to a place that you feel a bit more comfortable. Then you'll find those themes, those topics that you feel strong enough to get them. But I think it's little by little, right?
Thank you so much for joining us today, Antonio. It was a pleasure having you. And yeah, if you take anything with you today, people, then thought leadership for sustainable practices on LinkedIn can be a very powerful tool in educating people. And in the end, bring about the change we need to keep the earth our long-term home. And as we learned today, every one of us has a voice and can contribute to a more sustainable future by just speaking up. Stay tuned for the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. And see you next time at the Sustainability Leader Show.